Herman George Canady, born 1901, died 1970. Herman George Canady was the first race psychologist in America, and he was a leader in demonstrating experimentally that performance on intelligence quotient tests, or IQ tests, was significantly influenced by the social situation of the test. For example, who the tester was. Canady also led the way in showing that a student's gender influenced how she or he performed on IQ tests. Canady was born on October 9th, 1901, in Okmulgee, Oklahoma. His mother was Anna Carter Canady, and his father, a Methodist minister, was Howard T. Canady. His family was poor, and he moved frequently around the rural Midwest as a child, but his parents had high expectations for their children. After his father died in 1914, the Canady family moved to Sedalia, Missouri. There, Canady attended the high school department of George R. Smith College. Canady attended the high school department of George R. Smith College with his sister Estella. His mother worked at the college as a cook. After graduating from high school in 1923, Canady entered Northwestern University on a scholarship to study for the ministry. He paid his way through school as a railroad worker, short order cook, waiter, caretaker, and handyman. He also worked part-time for his room and board as a chauffeur for one of his professors. Besides working and studying, he began swimming at the university swimming pool in 1924. Unfortunately, the president of the university threatened expulsion, so he had to swim elsewhere. After a while, Canady became interested in the behavioral sciences and changed his mind about his major. He received his bachelor's degree in sociology in 1927 and his master's degree in clinical psychology in 1928, both from Northwestern. Later in 1928, he began to teach at West Virginia State College in the town of Institute, West Virginia. There, on August 16, 1934, he married his wife, the former Julia Witten, who also worked for the college. They were to have two children, Joyce and Herman Jr. Herman Jr. later became a circuit judge. In 1939, Canady returned to Northwestern to earn his Ph.D. He paid his way with a scholarship to Journal Education Board Fellowship, which he held from 1939 to 1941. For his dissertation, he studied factors that influenced the scores of black students on intelligence tests. He suspected that students' social and environmental situations had a greater influence on IQ scores than their races. His doctoral dissertation was titled Test Standing and Social Setting, a comparative study of the intelligence test scores of Negroes living under varied environmental conditions. When he received his Ph.D. in psychology on May 17, 1941, from Northwestern University, Canady was only the 10th black American to get a Ph.D. in psychology. He returned to West Virginia State College as a full professor. In the words of James L. Spencer, Canady, quote, was the first true race psychologist in the United States, unquote. Some of Canady's research focused on finding out why black students did poorly on intelligence tests. For centuries, many people had believed that blacks were less intelligent than whites because of their inferior genes. Canady did not agree. He thought that one factor influencing the outcomes of IQ tests might be stress. If there was racial hostility in a culture, and if the races of the tester and the students were different, then Canady thought that the stress from the hostile social environment might influence test performance. But Canady needed a rigorous way to prove that people performed poorly on intelligence tests because of the social environment. In 1936, Canady published a well-known article titled, quote, The Effect of Rapport on the IQ, a New Approach to the Problem of Racial Psychology, unquote. The article, which was based on his master's thesis written 8 years earlier, showed that the social situation of the IQ test had an impact on a person's test performance. If the person testing black students was black, then the students performed better than if the tester was white. Canady found a similar result for white students. If the person testing white students was white, then the students performed better than if the tester was black. Canady research showed that the social environment was also a factor in performance on IQ tests. In 1938, Canady showed how another factor, gender, influenced IQ test scores. In a study of 1,306 students, Canady discovered that female students did better than males on verbal portions of IQ tests, while males outperformed females on the math portions of IQ tests. It took a while for Canady's results to get around, but his work helped to show other researchers that simple experiments could be developed to demonstrate that other influences besides genes affected student performance on intelligence tests. Canady's work is a landmark in the struggle to create fair testing environments for all people, regardless of race or gender. Canady's long experience in the School of Hard Knocks taught him that a college education was not just about reading books and taking tests. Developing personal character was more important. His students had to be disciplined, neat, and well prepared. Canady insisted that his students come to class on time, and he locked out latecomers. He also criticized students who chewed gum, and he lectured women students who he felt wore too much makeup. Cheaters were expelled from his classes and were forbidden to take any other classes from him. Canady also had high academic standards. He was notorious for long, difficult tests, and he gave out few A's. Only 5% of his 380 students in 1937 earned A's. Though Canady could be tough in the classroom, he was also humorous and entertaining, and many of his students thought well of him and appreciated his standards and his personality. He would tell students that his middle initial G did not stand for George, but for God. If a student exclaimed, "Oh God," while taking one of his demanding tests, Canady would say, "Yes," to ease the tension. On the first day of class, Canady would sometimes enter the darkened room from the back, turn on the lights, and say, "Let there be light," to set the tone for the class. In addition to publishing and teaching, Canady was active in founding several professional organizations and participating in many others. He served his college in a variety of capacities, gave many presentations locally and at universities around the United States, served as a board member for numerous organizations, and consulted with a variety of groups. He retired from West Virginia State College in 1968, and he died on December 1st, 1970. Citations and sources are in the description below.